Continuing example 2C, requirement 8. Go back to the original data. Beckett's marketing manager suggests that the product can be repositioned as a more premium product and command a price of $225 per unit. Doing so would require increasing advertising expenses by $185,000 per year and variable costs by $10 per unit for better quality materials and packaging. If this change is made, our first question is, what is the company's new break-even point? So one thing we can do in one of these situations where we've got multiple things changing is we can just sort of recreate the complete contribution margin format statement. So what are our changes? Our first change is a change of revenue to $225 per unit. Our second change is an increase in fixed cost of $185,000 per year. So we can increase our fixed cost from $900,000 to $1,085,000, and we're going to increase our variable costs by $10 per unit. You do want to read carefully. Sometimes people will change this, will read this as change variable cost to $10 per unit, or they'll put a 10 in here instead of 80 plus the 10. So make sure you're reading carefully. So what's our question? So now we've got our new income statement. Now this income statement is not exactly describing what would happen. We've got a product with a higher price and different marketing positioning, so we can't guarantee that we would necessarily have 8,500 units sold. So we've changed our basic parameters, but our number of units here, again, being CVP analysis, this is the number that we expect to change pretty regularly. So let's answer our questions. If this change is made, what is the company's new break-even point? So our new fixed costs are $1,085,000. I'll put in a target profit line item here. And the first thing I'll do is leave it at 0, because that's what it takes to break even. So our required contribution is going to be the sum of these two. We're asked how many, we're not specified what's the company's new break-even point, so we could answer it in terms of units, CM per unit. Our new CM per unit is $135 per unit, so our break-even point is $1.085 million divided by $135 per unit, and our break-even point is 8,037 units. So if we plug 8,037 units into here, we will get break-even. All right, so that makes sense. So we can break even at 8,037 units. Our old break-even point, if we go back to our earlier requirements, our old break-even point was 7,500 units. So if we make this change, we have to sell more units to break even. And why would that be the case? Well, that would be the case largely because our fixed costs have increased from $900,000 to $1,085,000. It's helped somewhat by the fact that our contribution per unit is higher than it used to be, so that gets us to break even faster than if our CM were still 120. But either way, the increase in fixed costs more than offset the increase in contribution margin. We could also, since the question did not specify how we answered the question in terms of dollars of revenue or number of units, we could also answer the question by dividing our required contribution margin by our CM ratio. Whoops. Divided by, that's not right, equals divided by CM ratio. And as soon as Excel does its thing, we get the 1,808,333, 1,808,333. So either way, we can calculate our break-even point. Notice in this particular example that our contribution margin ratio has not changed. The $135 of CM ratio, $135 of CM per unit is still 60% of our sales revenue. So in this case, our CM ratio hasn't changed. That's the particular details of this problem. There could be, if we instead changed our selling price to $230 per unit, then our CM ratio would change. So it's not guaranteed that our CM ratio will stay the same, and we see that in the next problem. We'll see our CM ratio changing. Okay, so that's requirement 1. If this change is made, what's the company's new break-even point? More units have to be sold, 8,037 versus 7,500, and more revenue would have to be earned. If you go back to our prior question, instead of earning $1.5 million of revenue, we'd have to earn 1.8. Does that mean it's inherently a bad idea? Not necessarily. If our increased marketing efforts really do promote this product as a higher quality product, then we may sell more units and the higher break-even point may not be a problem. All right, let's continue on. If this change is made, how many units would Beckett need to sell to make the same net income it currently makes? So here's where our target profit slot helps. We can just plug in our current net income as our target profit and say now, in order to make our target profit of $120,000 with our increased fixed cost of $1,085,000, our required contribution margin is $1,205,000. Our new CM is $135 per unit, so we would need to sell 8,925 units, or 8,926 if we round up. So in order to make the same net income we currently make, our sales would have to increase from 8,500 to 8,926. Or from a revenue standpoint, our revenue would have to increase from 1.7 million to a little bit over 2 million. So in this case, our increased marketing efforts would have to be quite substantial. All right, they'd have to be very successful. Finally, answer this question without calculations. Would this change increase or decrease Beckett's operating leverage? Why? Well, notice what we're doing here. We're increasing fixed costs by doing this. Anytime you increase fixed costs, keeping all else equal, your operating leverage is going to increase. We have more costs we have to cover, and so degree of operating leverage is going to increase. Our company has become riskier, and we see this in the increased break-even point and the increased number of units we have to sell to break even. It's harder to break even. Now, at some point, once we do break even, because our contribution per unit is higher than it was under the original data, if we sell lots of units, we will end up better off. As managers, we have to make the judgment whether we think our increased marketing efforts are going to increase total sales with a more expensive product more than they currently are. So we have to create more value in the customer's mind than we're currently creating, and even enough more value to offset the increase in selling price. Whether that can be done is beyond the scope of this course, and of course would depend on the particulars of the product and its market and the marketing efforts that were done. But this is the kind of quantitative decision we'd have to undertake before we can make a judgment about whether the marketing efforts have a chance of being successful. So that is requirement 8, making changes to our selling price, variable cost, and fixed cost, and doing additional CVP analysis.